All right, Josh Shapiro. Who is Josh Shapiro, and why does Fat Tony, aka Cenk Uygur, have such a hard-on crush for him? Josh Shapiro. What is a Josh Shapiro? How would the world define Josh Shapiro? Well, Josh Shapiro is the governor of the great state of Pennsylvania, home to many great cities like Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Hershey, Pennsylvania. There was even an incident that took place in Pennsylvania, Butler, Pennsylvania, where things went ham. But let's go ahead and talk about this little love affair, because after all, Newsweek did an article that was published by Fat Tony himself. That's right, Fat Tony did an article. Fat Tony did an article about Josh Shapiro, because, like I said, folks, never expect TYT to do the right thing. So, Vice President and Democratic presidential nominee, air quote, selected, you mean? Weren't you running in this primary, Cenk? Is reportedly in the final stages of picking a running mate. Unfortunately, the best pick, by which I mean the most progressive pick, is being denounced by progressives in the most self-defeating way. Josh Shapiro, the widely popular governor of swing state Pennsylvania, is one of the frontrunners, and yet progressives have started a campaign against him over his position on Israel. Well, Cenk, listen, Cenk, you do realize that there's a genocide happening in Gaza, right? And that, maybe controversial statement here. Maybe people are tired of politicians that are owned by AIPAC and other Israeli lobby groups, but it's okay. My fellow progressive, it's got to stop. Josh Shapiro is the progressive pick. Why? Why, Fat Tony? Wall Street banks make an intense amount of money by running the pension funds in many different states. They view state employees who run those funds as suckers and charge exorbitant fees for mediocre results. Shapiro put an end to that when he was chairman of Montgomery County Board of Commissioners. He also took on predatory lenders when he was Attorney General of Pennsylvania. Those lenders were the subsidiary of an enormous private equity company, Warburg Pincus. Oh my goodness. If I didn't tell you who was behind that move, you might have guessed that the politician I was describing was Elizabeth Warren, or that nutless wonder Bernie Sanders. You would have guessed that because you can count on one hand the number of Democrats willing to take on giant corporate power and companies that could be potential donors. Economic populism is enormously popular with voters, but almost no politician in the country does it because it makes the donors very, very, very angry. In fact, I'm worried about writing this editorial for fear of tipping them off. Cenk, no one worships the ground you're on, okay? You're becoming increasingly irrelevant. But folks, when you dig in deeper about who Josh Shapiro is, especially his time as being Attorney General, it's not cash money, because I have a video that I'm going to play that's going to be quite disturbing. Quite disturbing indeed. Indeed, it will be. Okay, for all they know, Shapiro is an establishment Democrat. He is, because he's with Israel. You goof troop. Especially now that he's being accused by the progressive left of being one of the least progressive Democrats because of his position on Israel. Hey, folks. Hey. Let's have democracy in the chat. Let's say you have a progressive Democrat currently serving in the Senate and House. I know. Let's make up this mythical Democrat who is fighting for Medicare for all, willing to put their career for a force to vote, doing all this good stuff. And yet, oh my goodness, somehow, I don't know, wait a minute, they're taking a crap ton of money from AIPAC and other pro-Israeli lobby groups, and they're saying that Israel has the right to defend itself as the dead bodies keep on piling up. Pretty soon, there's going to be a mountain of skulls that will block out the sun. Would that change your opinion about that, progressive? Type 1 for Kit. Nobody's perfect. But we got to stop the Republicans in Twump. Type 2. To hell with anyone that's owned or associated with AIPAC or pro-Israeli lobby groups. I wonder how many twos we'll get in the chat. I wonder. So going on, continuing on. It's likely that Donald Class has no idea how progressive he might actually be. Wow. So he is a monstrous right-winger on Israel? Well, not at all. His position on Israel is correct. Those optics are terrible. Cenk, say that again. His position on Israel is correct, but his optics are terrible. Like all sane people, Shapiro supports a two-state solution. They're not going to do it, Cenk. Listen, okay? I'm quoting Netanyahu. Not by verbatim, but by what he has said. There's not going to be a two-state solution. Not going to happen. He has made that very, 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 very clear. He's not going to do a two-state solution. Okay? So while Shapiro supports a two-state solution, okay, whoop-de-doo. Great. He could take a dump in the toilet. All right? He doesn't crap his pants. But as for, genius moves, come on. Two-state solution? Netanyahu's not going to let that happen. And a free, independent Palestine. Not going to happen. As for support for Israel, consider his remarks about its leader. I personally believe Benjamin Netanyahu is the worst leader of all time. Okay. Who cares? You think he's going to stop the shipments and military aid? No. Again, he's governor, but you think even if he was serving the Senate, you think he'd do anything to stop it? No. Shapiro said in January, months before Chucky Boy Schumer came out against it. No, Chuck Schumer did not come out against Netanyahu. Chuck Schumer said that there should be free elections once Netanyahu steps down. Okay? He didn't tell Netanyahu to step down. He said that there should be elections after Netanyahu steps down. Okay? Again, this is what was said. Chucky Boy Schumer said that Netanyahu, when he steps down, there should be free elections. He didn't say Netanyahu should step down. What are you talking about? I couldn't agree more, and Shapiro was ahead of the curve in pointing this out. That was also about the same time Bernie Sanders was calling for a humanitarian pause in Gaza instead of a ceasefire. It took 3 more months for Senator Sanders to call Netanyahu an awful leader. When did Shapiro first call Netanyahu a terrible leader? Back in November of last year, well before almost any other major politician. Okay, and did Governor Shapiro call for Congress to stop the halting of military aid and funding? No. It's true that Governor Shapiro has been a reactionary about campus protests about Israel. Oh, wow. What do you think he was for? You think he was for the protesters or against? He was against. He came out strongly against them. Oh, I didn't see that coming. Boy, Cenk. Hey, listen, I know you're eating a lot of food because you're panicked because might not get that Katzenberg cash influx. But come on, dude. Come on, dude. Stop with the cope. He goes on to say, calling those same protesters, we wouldn't tolerate people dressed in KKK outfits. Then he instituted a dumb executive order calling for state employees who protest in a scandalous or disgraceful way to be fired. How is he progressive, Cenk? I mean, are you really that desperate? Or maybe you like being publicly humiliated. Who knows? No doubt anything that criticized Israel would have qualified, though. No doubt anything that criticized Israel would have qualified, though we never got to find out. By that time, all protests against Israel had been disbanded and the students arrested. My goodness. But the pro list is much longer than this one con. Governor Shapiro also busted, well, again, people who do illegal activity with people not of age inside the Catholic Church. Do you know how much courage it takes to take on the Catholic Church when you're a Jewish politician? You want to know how much courage it takes to take on AIPAC, Cenk? A lot. Same amount of courage. But guess what? Congress doesn't do that. I respect the strength and the moral clarity. Over 300 predator priests were outed. Countless children were saved. Yes, he has frustrating positions, like his recent push to lower corporate tax. Really? In the state, and his advocacies for school vouchers. Yes, he's nowhere near ideal, but which Democrat is? Do you think Kamala Harris is going to change our position on Israel? Please don't tell me you're that naive. Well, then why are you going? Why are you even adding your 2 cents? You've done such a terrible time even running for office. And even if you think, then great, you don't have to worry about Shapiro's position. He's not in charge. She is. The reality is almost all Democrats do exactly what their donors ordered them to do. For Republicans, I would just take out the word almost, no matter what the issue is. So when I see someone who has defied the donors several times to help the average voter, I'm a little shocked. He didn't do anything shocking. He didn't do anything earth-shattering. But look at this. Again, told y'all, this is Netanyahu trying to put a hit on Shapiro. He's the last guy Netanyahu wants in office. He can't be called an anti-Semite. He won't be bullied by AIPAC. And he thinks Netanyahu is one of the worst leaders of all time. I'm willing to bet somewhere in the shadows, underneath the tables, that there's a secret button for AIPAC for good old Shapiro to hit so that they can give him some AIPAC cash. And look, because, of course, of all people, Fetterman. Fetterman has concerns about Shapiro for VP. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Again, Fat Tony going on to say, Michigan and Pennsylvania have voted together for 80 years, except Ford won Michigan because it was his home state. Also, Shapiro has 90% approval rating among Democrats in Pennsylvania. He has an astounding 61% approval rating in Pennsylvania. That sounds unifying, not divisive. Well, hey, to my Pennsylvania audience, how would you rate Governor Shapiro? Right? How would you rate him? Well, let's go ahead and talk about Governor Shapiro. Let's go back in time when then Attorney General Shapiro claimed that a Philly woman who was stabbed 20 times in 2011 was those wounds were self-inflicted. I know it's very horrific. So I got to be careful with some of these words. But let's go ahead and pull up this article. It's from the Philadelphia Inquirer. All right. Pennsylvania Supreme Court takes case of Ellen Greenberg, whose death by 20 stab wounds was ruled self-deletion. You know, I'm not an expert, but when it comes down to that kind of thing, I think it's usually just one and done. Like, you're not just doing it like 20 times. So the state's highest court will take on one of the city's most confounding death cases, that of Philadelphia first grade teacher. I'm sorry this happened to her. Ellen Greenberg, whose death by 20 stab wounds in 2011 was ruled homicide before being switched to self-deletion. I got to say that because of YouTube guidelines. In an order issued Tuesday, the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania granted the appeal filed by Greenberg's parents, Joshua and Sandra of Harrisburg, of a Commonwealth Court ruling last year that prevented their civil case against the city of Philadelphia from going to trial. In that case, the Greenbergs seek to have the manner of their daughter's death changed from self-deletion back to homicide or undetermined. The Greenbergs' Center City attorney, Joseph Padarza, said his clients were elated and moved to tears when they learned their petition to appeal was granted. And good for the parents. Because 20 stab wounds? And that's what? How? How does that happen? That doesn't happen much. Okay, I'm extremely pleased and a little surprised given how hard it is to have a case accepted for review by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Padarza said the court can only take a very small fraction of cases and then only those which impact Pennsylvanians across the state. A spokesperson for the city's law department declined to comment due to ongoing litigation. According to the order granting the appeal, the Supreme Court will consider the issue of whether executors and administrators of an estate have a standing to challenge an erroneous filing recorded on the descendant's death certificate, where that finding constitutes a bar or material impediment to recovery of victims' compensation, restitution for wrongful death, as well as private criminal complaints. Greenberg, 27, was found by her fiance, Samuel Goldberg, in the kitchen of their Manayunk apartment with a 10-inch knife lodged in her chest on January 26, 2011. I'm so sorry that this family has to go through this. Investigators on the scene treated her death as self-deletion because of the apartment door, which Goldberg said he broke down, was locked from the inside. There were no signs of an intruder, and Greenberg had no defensive wounds, police said. But the next morning, then Assistant Philadelphia medical examiner Marlon Osborne discovered a total of 20 stab wounds to Greenberg's body, including 10 to the back of her neck, and ruled her death a homicide. So, look, again, not an expert, but, you have a knife in your hand trying to, that's just not how you do it. Kind of suspicious. But wait a minute. A lot of you might be wondering, who on earth was the Attorney General? There had been somebody who was the Attorney General, right? You might be wondering, well, what's going on? Why does this relate to Fat Tony and Cenk Uygur? Why does it relate to anybody? Because, well, folks, then governor, or current governor, I'll pull this up here. Supreme Court to review self-deletion ruling in case of Philly woman stabbed 20 times in 2011. Then Attorney General Josh Shapiro, what? Back claim wounds were self-inflicted. You don't say. Why would you do that? Now, and again, I just want to read this article here. With Vice President and presumptive Democratic nominee Kamala the Cop Harris set to begin her campaign in Philly, with her yet to be named running mate, speculation has arisen about her choice, with many pointing to Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. Shapiro's selection could be controversial for the party's radical base due to his Jewish heritage and support for Israel. Progressive heavyweight champion, right, Fat Tony? Additionally, a 2011 case now heading to the state Supreme Court could pose a significant challenge to his potential candidacy. My goodness, in 2011, Ellen Greenberg, a 27-year-old first-grade teacher, was found dead in her apartment, which she shared with her fiance, Sam Goldberg. Her body had 20 stab wounds, including 10 to the back of her neck and head. Philadelphia Assistant Medical Examiner Marlon Osborne initially ruled her death a homicide, but later changed it to self-deletion after pressure from police. And look, there is a recording, a 911 recording. It is very difficult to hear. But this is again a failure on many people's parts, including Josh Shapiro. Despite public outcry and evidence suggesting homicide, then Attorney General and new progressive heavyweight champion Josh Shapiro upheld the self-deletion ruling. The Greenberg family has fought for years to have the death certificate changed back to homicide, and the Pennsylvania Supreme Court will soon hear their arguments, as they should. The case could also impact Shapiro's political future, as it raises questions about his judgment and decision-making. Many people are asking, hey, Josh Shapiro, did you cover up this murder? The court will determine whether executors and administrators of an estate can challenge a death certificate ruling that affects victims' compensation, wrongful death suits, or criminal complaints. So, Josh Shapiro was behind it all. Well, not behind it all. He was just one of those people who helped rule it to be, hey, maybe this case is just self-deletion. But of course, there was a debate too. So we'll play a little snippets of this little conversation where Fat Tony is defending how Josh Shapiro is the progressive choice for VP.
Frame this as the progressive choice. You think Shapiro is the progressive choice, but even in your setup and in that piece, you made one fleeting mention of Walz, but in this setup here, you continually mention Walz. So I guess I'm wondering, like, I don't see this as much as like an argument, as more like how do you make this case that this is the progressive choice when you can say these both of these potential picks have done this, but this guy is the progressive choice. Why not Walz? When Walz has called for a ceasefire where Shapiro hasn't. Shapiro has conflated criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism, something that you have pointed out on the show as damaging to the cause and unfair, and he's been called out by the ACLU for it. So how is this the progressive choice when issues that I've seen you rail against are pretty big red flags coming from Shapiro?
Yeah, so a couple of things here. This is not Shapiro versus Walz. And so remember,
Cenk, listen. You're going to bat for somebody who's pro-Israel, okay? Which means they're okay with what Israel's doing. You know, right now, the death toll keeps on rising up. And it looks like Israel wants to start stuff with Lebanon, Iran, Turkey, anyone and anything. They're in a forever war. And Josh Shapiro, oh, what? He called Netanyahu a terrible leader? But did Josh Shapiro say anything about, oh, I don't know, stopping the shipments? Billions of dollars of aid? Right? No? Yes? But somehow he's a progressive heavyweight champion. Cenk, do me a favor. Do me a favor. Stay in LA. Please don't come to Chicago because, man, I got to tell you, Fat Tony, you've been nothing but a disappointment.
We're not even talking about our most ideal choice, right? Bernie Sanders is off the board because we're never.
No, stop talking about Bernie.
We're going to consider him. My first choice was Jamie Raskin, who's been terrific on a lot of fronts. Real progressive, came out, against what Israel was doing, called for a ceasefire a long time ago, et cetera, right? But we're down to the contenders now. So I'm not here to debate that Tim Walz is a bad guy or not. Absolutely not. Tim Walz is perfectly fine, perfectly good. And if you say, hey, I like him as a progressive a little bit more than Shapiro, I'm okay with that. I'm not. Look, I know that Tim Walz has also done some conservative things in Minnesota, but No, I'm not a perfectionist. That's exactly what I'm saying about Shapiro. He did some conservative things too. Now he's talking about a corporate tax cut in Pennsylvania. I hate that. Talks about school vouchers. I don't like that. That's not a progressive position. But Tim Walz has similar positions like that, but has passed a number of great bills that are very progressive on social and economic.
Man, dude, Cenk, you know, not only did you get smacked around in your first time running for a Democratic primary, way back when you were running for Congress, but you also chose to embarrass yourself by getting involved in the presidential race this election cycle. I mean, I know you're a cuck for that Katzenberg cash, but this reeks of pure desperation. Because what are you expecting to get, or is it at hope to receive, by praising Josh Shapiro? That some corporate Democrat with a lot of money or a lobby group with a lot of money is going to give you some cash? I mean, everyone saw what happened when you invest into large online media outlets like TYT or Vice or Vox or BuzzFeed. It's a terrible investment because ain't nothing happened, because everything gets neutered, everything gets corporatized, and you got the vulture capitalists swooping around. This almost looks like a sign of, hey, give me money, like a desperate stripper at the club realizing that no one has any money anymore.
Economic issue. Basically, what I'm doing here, Jordan, is two things. Number one, the reason I wrote this is because I only write op-eds when I feel like everybody's getting it wrong. So I wrote one for Newsweek about 10 months ago saying Joe Biden should drop out. He's obviously going to lose. And the reason I wrote that was because I was so frustrated that they couldn't see. Of course he's gonna lose. Look at his approval numbers. Look at the underlying numbers. Look at his age, etc. And here Shapiro is being painted as some sort of conservative Democrat. And conservative Democrats and corporate Democrats do not take on corporate power. They never do that. And he's also done other terrific things. He took on the Catholic clergy, which was brave and saved a lot of kids. 300 pedophile priests outed. He's increased the budget in Pennsylvania. The Republicans hate him for it. So, and he won't back down from it. So this is not a Walz versus Shapiro. This is, Shapiro is greatly misunderstood. And the idea that he is, conservative or strictly corporate.
And we're gonna stop here. There's a little bit more that Cenk's gonna be saying, but you're going to bat for somebody who's taken AIPAC cash money, okay? Who's pro-Israel. I don't care if he said something mean about Netanyahu. Is he calling for actions? Is he calling for a ceasefire? Is he saying that Netanyahu should be held accountable for his crimes? Is he doing anything like that? Yes, no. The answer is probably no. And yet, this is a desperate attempt to try and make yourself relevant, or either that trying to build up hope that somehow the progressive movement can still reform the Democratic Party. Gone is 2016. Gone is the desperate hope of 2020. Those 2 years are in a memory now. They are gone. No longer to be looked upon with pride or joy, but with sadness and despair, because our progressives in the Democratic Party sold us out. Josh Shapiro or anybody else doesn't care about progressive issues. He's all in for Israel, Cenk. And I get it. You suffer from Trump derangement syndrome. Don't worry. When election night comes in November, I'll occasionally fly on by TYT just to see how y'all are doing, because your meltdown in 2016 was nothing but pure gold. And chances are the Democrats are going to screw the pooch. I don't care what people are saying about Trump. I get it. Hey, I don't want to see Trump get elected either. But you know what? Democrats, you have failed in your argument in trying to convince voters to support you.